You want me to text him?
Five o'clock.
You're gonna return the least valuable item?
We'll call this meeting to order. 5 o'clock. Today is July 24, 2023. This is the regular meeting of the Lake Charles Harbor and Terminal District. Call on Mr. Guidry Kevin for the invocation, please.
May we all bow our heads, please. Heavenly Father, we come this evening in the most humble and gracious way we know how, giving thanks upon all your many blessings that you bestowed upon us as your Christian people. We ask a special blessing upon this board. We ask a special blessing upon the employees at the port, and we ask a special blessing upon the people of Calcasieu Parish and the city of Lake Charles, that we can all come together and do great things in your Son name, in Jesus. We ask all these blessings in your Son name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. And
May we all face the flag, please.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job.
thank you. Okay. The board encourages public comments and questions regarding all agenda items. Persons wishing to do so should complete a speaker's card, which is at the entrance to the boardroom. When speaking or asking a question on an agenda item, one should, in addition to completing the card, come to the microphone, be recognized, and provide your name, address, and phone number. Comments by individuals will be limited to 3 minutes. On the agenda, I believe we have Hunter Lundy, a candidate for governor, to do an introduction, but my understanding is he got
He's running late,
But he is
Mr.
gonna be
President,
here.
so if we could maybe, when he just called and said he's about 5 minutes away, so if
All
we
right.
could just add him in whenever he gets here.
Then let's proceed to the next item, which is the approval of the minutes of the June 26, 2023 regular meeting.
I so move, Mr. President.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Bales, second by Mr. Dixon. All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Brings us to the first resolution or submission, 2023-041. Mr. I guess you're going to address that, Ricky?
Yes, sir. We're requesting board adoption of a 2023 rate of 2.48 mils. We bring this to you each year. This year, we're just requesting that we maintain the millage rate of 2.48, similar to what it was last year. And we anticipate, based on some information that we got from the Calcasieu Parish tax assessor, that will generate about $4.8 million in ad valorem revenues to the port.
And Ricky, this is the third year we've held it at this rate?
I don't remember the last time they had revaluation. Do you remember, Cameron? They do the revaluation every 4 years, but I don't remember. I can get that for you.
No, that's all right.
I believe next year is a revaluation year, so that'd be right, this would be the third year.
Okay.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Brings us to submission 2023-042, authorizing Mr. Self to enter into a contract with Matchstick for brand identity consulting. Mr. Self?
Yes, sir. Staff seeks board approval to enter into a contract with Matchstick to build a new brand identity for the Port of Lake Charles. This idea actually came from John Ringo, who had gone through something very similar at Visit Lake Charles. And we interviewed 4 different companies that do rebranding activities. We have online with this Matchstick, so they'll be able to answer questions for you though. Several other ports have gone through this recently. New Orleans, Miami, Houston have gone through similar rebranding activities. And we just felt like because of our logo, and it will update our logo and tagline, and we felt like it was time to do that. Would you, and feel free to ask Matchstick any questions you may have.
If, to get it on the agenda so we can discuss it, I'll make a motion to approve submission.
Motion by
I'll
Mr.
second that.
Carrillo, second by Mr. Guidry. Discussion or questions?
You have a representative here with?
Yeah, they're online.
Okay. In talking with Ricky and John, they mentioned that y'all have done work rebranding public entities, and I wonder if you could give me a little history or background on how you interact rebranding, which you do commercially from what I see in your literature, to how you interface that with rebranding and including it as a public entity.
Yeah. Well, great question, and thanks for asking. I'm Craig, I'm one of the partners and founders of Matchstick. We've been doing this for almost 20 years, and our work is really across kind of for-profit, nonprofit, public, private, government, different institutions. We work with different city organizations. We work with chambers of commerce. We work with moving and shipping and logistics companies. So, kind of very similar in different ways. And I think that the process in a lot of ways is really the exact same. The difference is the stakeholders, because you have with an entity like Port of Lake Charles, which I know is in some ways it's a private entity and a public entity a little bit at the same time. And so from a stakeholder standpoint, we want to make sure that we're being good. This organization is being representing the area of Lake Charles well, and we're have good involvement from different stakeholders, such as a board like yourself and other people that it may affect. So the process we go through is very similar. It's really more so making sure that this is something that's going to represent not only the port well to an international audience, but also engage well as an honorable member of the community.
And during the process, will you have milestone areas that you could share with the board and maybe simultaneously with the staff so we can kind of see where it's gone in the process?
Yes, we certainly will. There's kind of a strategy phase up front where we really work to define the essence of the brand. That's a good spot to have that, and then we can get to a spot where we're working on more the expression of that side of the brand, the visual side, the logo and feel, and the verbal side, the tagline, voice and tone. Those are some good times to check in, kind of explain the process and the rationale, and make sure that we're getting the right approvals along the way.
And just to go a little bit further, what we talked about for you, those of you who were not at the briefings, we talked about at those milestones at certain periods, staff is going to be working with them on a regular basis, but bringing you all in and having a committee that will help out as we go through and look at different options. You know, we've seen different logos. Some of them are more abstract, some of them are not so abstract.
Yeah.
And so they're going to give us some options, and we'll go through those along the way. Colors, schemes, things such as that, taglines. I certainly want the board to be involved with that.
I guess, Mr. Johnson, maybe you can answer me. Do we have to somewhat be in line with, say, the city logo, parish logo, to where it kind of all comes together?
Ties
being
in,
that-
huh?
You know, because I guess what I'm saying is, you know, when you look at the logos, somehow they all tie into one another. Is that something that you all will be looking at when you look to give us a new look for the port and see what fits best for us?
I think it's a great question. I think a lot of that question specifically probably is a strategic question.
Right now, we look too much like
And,
Lake Charles.
you want to
It
be
looks too much like
connected in,
Lake Charles.
it needs to be, sometimes they're very closely connected, sometimes there's more distance, sometimes it's somewhere in between, and there's a lot of nuance in there. And so our team will be diving deep and really navigating that, and ultimately work to give you back a brand that will represent you well in the community.
Okay. Okay.
Other questions?
I guess the only thing, Mr. President, that I'd like to add is, and I've shared that with Ricky and John, is that when the final product is done, before it's released, I'd like the board to have, you know, the final okay on it.
And that was certainly the plan all along. We'd like board involvement.
John, since you're responsible for the genesis of this, you want to weigh in on what your thought process was?
Yeah, I mean, I think having gone through the process with Visit Lake Charles and seeing what that firm did when they came in, and they did some stakeholder interviews. They really talked to all the people that were involved in any way with what kind of message they wanted to tell and how they wanted to represent themselves to not only the public, but also to folks that may be utilizing Visit Lake Charles' services. I just thought that I was really impressed by the whole process, and I think the port could really benefit from something like that. I don't know that it has ever been done here, where we had an outside firm come in and ask questions like, what kind of message do you want to tell? What do you want your look to be? And I just think we could really benefit from that. I think we've had the same logo for decades, and I think it's just good to do a refresh and a rebrand. I think it's
I
a
agree.
perfect time for the port to do that.
Yeah.
You know, there's just a lot of good that can come from it, and I don't see any negatives that can come from it.
We're approaching the
Especially with all
100-year
It's a good idea.
anniversary of the port.
Say again?
We're approaching the 100-year anniversary of the port, so
Fresh.
And we're revitalizing the port to the future with all the capital projects, so.
That's right.
It is a good time.
I do.
Lake Charles.
I think
say
it's a
we
great
take a
idea.
vote.
All right, question's been called. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So be it. Thank y'all. Look.
Mr. President, Mr. Lundy is here.
Yes.
And
All right. So we'll go back. Welcome, Hunter.
And I'm going to apologize to Hunter.
you doing?
There was a scheduling mishap between me and his scheduler, so either I told them it was on Wednesday or they wrote it down as Wednesday, so I apologize for that.
Well, for the record, we'd like to welcome Hunter Lundy, candidate for governor of the state of Louisiana.
Excuse my informality, but I've actually been walking on the streets today, so I'm sweating and dressed informal because I've been campaigning. But it all worked out well. I was in Lake Charles today, and I thank you for this opportunity very much. And, you know, actually it was my dad's employer, Horace Austin, who helped create this port 100 years ago. And he created the port for the purposes of running a stevedoring company here. And so he was on the founding grounds of this operation, and I've got some old pictures from 1927 and 26 that if Matt hadn't given it to the port, I'll make sure y'all get those pictures for the history of, if you're going to have a 100-year anniversary coming up, you're going to want that. But I don't need to discuss my bio. I want to discuss what a year and a half ago I left the law practice to run for governor. I felt led to do that. I had confirmation from 4 people separate and apart from each other. The last one was my 90-year-old mother. And so I think that I have some skills and some talents that I can be a great advocate for the people of Louisiana. I'm a Christian and I'm an independent, and I'm not obligated to any caucus or any party. You know, I just want to deal with right ideas. And of course, I know the economy of Louisiana. When you see that push card, you see that I'm talking about education being the solution to crime and to poverty, and that we're the #1 poverty state in the nation. And but for the fact of the Port of Lake Charles and the waterways on this end of the state that generate salaries in the $90,000 range, and the river, which generates salaries in the $70,000 range for people, we would be the most extremely impoverished state, because that offsets our average income in Louisiana in the high 40s. So we have some issues that we can deal with, and we can do it through education. And so I'm a guy that's a proponent of early childhood education, having been the son of a kindergarten teacher, and a sister who's a retired kindergarten teacher, and a daughter that teaches at the community college. So, and my father was a high school football coach. So I have a lot of information about education. And I know that the education and the illiteracy and the incarceration run hand in hand. So I've got a vision to do some things that can change Louisiana. And it's, you know, for those of us in this room who are probably all blessed financially, don't have a clue sometimes of what's the rest of the state is until you ride around it. And I've done it the last 18 months. I've been in the slums of Nairobi, and I've seen terrible sights. But I mean, we have some here in Louisiana. But it's going to take an uplift by everybody in the state to take on this issue so we can change the perception. Again, we're blessed in this community. They're blessed along the river. You know, our waterways and our agriculture are the 2 things that drive the economy in this state. But that can change. So I've got a vision for Central and North Louisiana. I've got a vision where we can involve our UL system and our universities, that we can transform Louisiana. We can get rid of blight, get rid of poverty. When you get rid of blight, you reduce crime. When you keep kids in school, you reduce crime. So it's all tied together. You can read the message on the card. I don't want to abuse the time that you give me. And I appreciate it, John and Ricky, for allowing me to come do this. And each one of y'all who I do know pretty well. I mean, I'm the oldest candidate in the race, but I'm also, I think God says wisdom trumps knowledge and understanding. So between me and Keith Prudhomme and Mr. Dixon, we got the most gray hair in this room. And so that's what I'm about, and that's what I plan on doing as your next governor. And you know, one thing to remember, and today I was all over town. I've been mostly out of town in the last 2 or 3 months, but planning on coming back and then leaving again, because the state is a big state. It's to remind people that when I came back to Louisiana after law school and working for a federal judge, I went to work for Governor Jones's old law firm. So Sam Jones had died, but I mean, Bill Tett was running the firm, and they had some great lawyers in that firm, and I learned from those great lawyers. But what had Governor Jones done? You know, he was called the reformer during the war. Now, he created the civil service to try to overcome some of the problems that the Huey Long administrations had caused. But today, you know, civil service is something that is a little different than it was 70 years ago, and we got to look at that. But what he really did was he created First Federal Savings and Loan. He sent his stepson, Jimmy Barty, to run Gulf National Bank. He sent Gabby Harper to run First Federal. He brought industry to Lake Charles along the river. I can go on and on what Governor Jones did, because he was an active guy that cared about the people of Louisiana. And he really helped this community. He brought industry. I used to call him the plant manager for City Service Company. You know, Mr. McFadden never made a decision unless he called Bill Tett. He knew wherever pipeline was out there. And in my early years as a lawyer, I watched Bill Tett and Ken Spears, who's still practicing law today. Keith and Tom know Ken real well. They actually handled the transaction of selling City Service to Occidental, who then sold it to Southland, then they created Citgo, and everything shifted. It took months to do that, but in the 80s, that was a $2 billion transaction. Today, it'd be a $20 billion transaction. So that's some of my experience. And so I think that I bring something to the table that no other candidate does. And the fact that I'm an independent, I think, and that I don't know anything to anybody except a good faith effort to do everything I can do. And the difference between me, and if you look at the front page of the Morning Advocate today, they did a story on me. And so I'm separate from the rest of the field, and I'm going to govern, I'm not going to rule. So my personality is not going to be an object to success. So that's the way I view it. So thank you. I hope I didn't go over my time allotted. I appreciate you calling me. I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is submission 2023-043, authorizing the district to enter into a replacement agreement with the State Department of Transportation and Development under the Port Construction and Development Priority Program. Mr. Self?
Yes, sir. Staff requests the Board of Commissioners to authorize the district to enter into a replacement agreement with the State of Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, Louisiana Port Construction and Development Program. We entered into the initial agreement, that's why this was called a replacement agreement. It relates to the 4, 5, and 6 project when we were approved for ports priority funding, and now that there's funding available, we have to enter into what's called a replacement agreement. There's $4.1 million that's been authorized through that pot of money for the port.
Do we have a
I'll
motion?
make a motion, we approve 2023-043, authorizing the Lake Charles Harbor and Terminal District to enter into a replacement agreement with the state.
I second that, Mr. President.
All right, motion by Mr. Dixon, and second by Mr. Guidry. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Brings us to submission 2023-044. Mr. Self?
Yes, sir. Staff requests the Board of Commissioners to authorize the district to enter into an agreement with the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program through Restore Louisiana Infrastructure, FEMA Assistance Non-Federal Share Match Program. As you recall, there's a non-federal cost share on some of these FEMA projects, which is 10%. This grant allows, through CDBG-DR, allows us to get reimbursed for that 10% portion for the Cat A and Cat B work that's been done. And that's, essentially we just have to fill out the grant, receive the money, because we've already been approved.
Wow.
And it's
No
going to generate
brainer.
about $107,000 so far.
Ricky, are there any other categories other than?
I believe it's just for Category A and Category B, and it will open up again for other Cat A. We haven't paid or been reimbursed all Cat A and Cat B expenses yet. I guess we've paid it, we just haven't been reimbursed yet. So as we get reimbursed, and if they fell into that window of time, we can apply for future grants. As long as we weren't 100% reimbursed, there's a period during which you receive 100% reimbursement. As long as they're outside of that period, some of that you get reimbursed through the grant program.
Ricky, is there a portion that's specified for city and parish entities, being that we're the port? Is there an amount that's given to each of those entities?
I'm sure that those other entities are able to apply for the same grant program that we did.
So what I'm asking, is it a cutoff for those, so it's for us? When you mentioned an amount that we just had to apply for and we would have it. Is that what I understood you saying?
It's the
I mean,
10%.
I guess any entity, any governmental entity that is a non-federal sponsor that has a 10% cost share, that doesn't get reimbursed through some other means, because like right after the storm, they reimburse you so many days at 100%.
Right.
If you pay expenses outside of that time frame, you can apply through this grant program to get reimbursed.
Okay.
I think we need to get a motion.
Mr. President, I move adoption of 2023-044.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Creelow, second by Mr. Prudham. Any further discussion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passes. Brings us to the briefing notes. Okay, first matter is the Executive Director quarterly expenses briefing note.
It's just a recap.
Address that, okay.
Glad to answer any questions you
All
have.
right. Cameron, forecast 2 briefing.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna start off with the 6 months ended June 30th, 2023. For those 6 months, we generated revenues of around 22.8 million, which was favorable 2.7 million. The primary driver of that's been petroleum coke. It's been relatively high, actually. Year to date, it's actually higher through June than it was for the entire year 2022. So we're looking at most likely doubling that by the end of the year, and you'll see that on the forecast side. Offsetting that was lower calcine coke and then barite due to timing. We do have some barite ships on the schedule. I'm sure Todd will mention that later. Expenses were 17.2 million, which was unfavorable about 1.7 million. Higher operating expenses as we continue to rebuild, higher insurance premiums, and then the timing of the Fournette Street expenses. Non-operating revenues and expenses for the 6 months ended was 1.5 million, which is actually favorable 1.5 million. We continue to see those higher interest rates generating higher interest on our bank accounts, so good there. For the 6 months ended, we had cash flows of about 6 million compared to 3.7 budgeted, so really healthy cash flow. Forecast 2, which includes the 6 months ended June 30th, and then the forecast for the remainder of the year, we anticipate revenues to be around 47.4 million, which is favorable about 5.1 million. Again, primarily due to that higher pet coke that we've seen in the first half and we expect to continue. Expenses we anticipate being around 33.9 million, again unfavorable about 2.7 million with those higher operating expenses, insurance premiums, and some legal expenses with ongoing litigation. Also, non-operating revenues and expenses, we expect to be around 3.9 million, still favorable due to those higher interest rates, around 2.4 million. And cash flows, we expect at the end of the year to be around 15.7 million versus 10.6 million budgeted, so 5.1 million favorable. So looking really good on the cash flow. On the balance sheet, changes are kind of the same we've seen all year with the P3 insurance premiums and then hurricane recoveries and reimbursements going on. And then in your packet following the briefing note, you'll see some breakdown of those informations for the information for 6 months ended, and the forecast included the anticipated year-end project information expenses.
Well, before we go on to the next briefing note, I'd like to point out a couple of things that Cameron mentioned. The revenues that we're forecasting for 2023 are the highest, not only if we break it down to vessel and cargo revenues, it's highest in the history of the port at 26 million. Total revenues of 47.4 million, that's the highest in the history of the port. The revenues of 47.4 are 10% higher than 2022, which was a previous record.
And that's inclusive of rental?
Yeah. But if you look at just the vessel and cargo side, vessel and cargo revenues are 20% higher than they were in 2022. The big increase is, you can look at it, an increase from right at 21.7 to 26 million, 26.1 million, 2023. So it's 20% increase in vessel and cargo services. It's 10% higher than the next closest year, which was last year, in terms of record for revenues for the port. Really strong cash flow as well.
Thank you, Cameron.
No problem.
Any questions or anything else?
I'll roll into FEMA GOSEP report.
Please do.
Again, project totals increase, decrease as they normally do. The main item that I would like to point out, as Ricky sent the email, it's not included on this one because this was sent out before those large projects were obligated. But as Ricky mentioned in his email to the board, the 90+ million that was being held up in the FEMA system with their little issue has now been obligated. It's available for us to draw down on. So as projects get really going, those big projects, we'll be able to draw down on those funds. So,
And we'd like to thank Elizabeth with Congressman Higgins' office for helping us with that as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Has the flow from GOSEP gotten any better? They draw it down to GOSEP, right? And then you have
It gets obligated from FEMA to GOSEP, and then
Yeah,
as
you
we
have to
spend
pull
it,
it from there as
we
you
submit to
spend
GOSEP and receive that money.
Has that process, I know there was a lot of delays in it at one time, has it improved any?
It's going about as well as can be expected. They contracted with an outside auditing type service, I guess, that is handling some of that. So there's been a little bit of a holdup there because they bill hourly just like another consultant. So that there's sometimes it feels like they're generating additional work for themselves, but for the most part, we're managing. It's flowing pretty well.
Gotta justify your existence.
Seems that way.
Kind of what's the time lag from
We haven't
when
had
you
too many-
submit to receive?
We haven't had too many big projects go through. The smaller projects have been coming through relatively quickly because they did increase the small project threshold. So a lot of those projects are going through pretty quick, and those have been the projects that we've been pushing through. These are the big projects that we've been waiting on to go through. So we'll really start to see that over the next couple months as those projects get drawn down on.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anything more on it, Cameron?
That was the best news I got for you.
Don't stop now. Okay, I'll bring us to, you want to go into administration?
That was pretty much what I had.
That was it? I'm trying. Okay. Let's see here. The guest Channing will pick up with you.
Ladies and gentlemen, over the past several months, I've been reporting on regulations by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that would put in speed limits and transit restrictions in the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico over a portion of the Gulf that was defined as a critical habitat for the Rice's whale, which is a new species of whale that's been identified. There's somewhere between 50 and 100 of these animals in the Gulf. And NOAA, at the insistence of a number of environmental organizations, have published these regulations. I read an article not too long ago, last week, that said there were 75,000 comments on these proposed regulations. I have to assume that there were not 75,000 comments in support. It stirred up quite a bit of interest. The Lake Charles maritime industry opposed these proposals because we thought that at some point it could extend to the West Gulf. Lo and behold, this morning in the Federal Register is a notice of proposed rulemaking by the National Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a department within the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The NIMS, which that's their acronym, is proposing to extend the critical habitat for these animals all the way around to Brownsville. So it will impact, if NOAA then changes its regulations, it will impact every Gulf and every port in the Gulf. It'll make it extremely difficult for us to do business because they have a 10-knot speed limit. You can't operate ships at 10 knots in a lot of weather circumstances. Can't do it safely. They have a no nighttime transit through the critical habitat, which shuts down our port at night. So we are trying to come up right now with a strategy to address this new proposed regulation. Comments are due by September 22nd, so we have about 6 weeks to wrestle with this. We have sent this to the Picard Group, asking them what their recommendations are, and we'll go forward from there. But I wanted to bring to your attention the fact that it ain't over. So if there are any questions about that or about my report, I'd be happy to answer.
What do the ships typically cruise at that area?
I'm sorry, Matt?
What is the typical speed of a ship that they're reducing it from
It's
what to 10 knots?
20 knots,
So about 50%.
15, 20 knots, depending on what the conditions are.
But it's the nighttime that's.
Nighttime.
Yeah, and I have to say that the pilot boat in heavy weather, 6-foot seas, can't get out at a 10-knot speed limit. They gotta be going faster than that. So this is, I don't wanna be an alarmist, but this is a terrible regulation that could shut this port down. So we have to address it.
Jenny, I haven't read a whole lot about this whale species, but this is not a migratory whale, is that correct? Is that what I'm?
As far as I know, it is not. Now, look, way out of my wheelhouse, but I did read the biological report that NOAA said based there, and I did understand every third word, there's no doubt about that. But from what I understand, this is not a migratory
I
species.
mean, my point is, it's a 12-month problem.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is.
Yeah.
What's the limit?
Say again? Well, you know, our recommendation is sort of,
Can we strike that?
Yeah, please do, please do. Please strike that.
Or can we at least identify the speaker?
well, our recommendation was if there's only 50 or 100 of them, tag them. No, I was a little bit
Moving
more
on.
politically correct than that. Tag them. NOAA's got that big sophisticated port system where they tell us what the tides and the currents are in most of the ports in the Gulf. They could certainly do the same thing and tell us where the whales are. And we can zig and zag and miss them, or at least the captains can. Whether or not that ever gets implemented is another question. But it is a way to coexist with these animals.
So Channing, economically, that would impact us greatly.
Yes, sir.
If they're not migratory, how did they get here? I don't ever heard, that's the first I've ever heard of them.
Well, they were
I didn't know
they
there were whales in the Gulf either. I've got people there are some people who have submitted comments that said they've been fishing in the Gulf for 20 years and have never seen a whale.
Yeah, I've seen.
There's been 2 observations of the whale, I think, since 2015 or some number like that. It's not very common. But
Were they sober?
pardon me?
Were they sober?
I don't know if they were. It could be like the pink dolphin, but they have pictures of that too.
I've seen it.
If I remember the biological report correctly, the females and the cows and the pups, or whatever you call them,
Yeah.
stay in the same place. The males leave and come back. I don't know where the males go to. I question whether this is really a subspecies of the Brodus whale. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know. But I don't know if their scientific report has been peer-reviewed or anything, but this is quite concerning.
The bulls are probably afraid.
I don't know if I don't know if this is just a genetic mutation of the Brodus whale.
Wow.
Wow.
That's too much.
Well,
So you know all, now I've told you everything I know about whales. Are there any more questions?
Well,
I hate to ask her that more than. Move on.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, let's move on here.
it's a hard
Thank
act
you,
to
Cheney.
follow.
I'm sure you'll keep us advised.
Yeah.
Todd, I guess we'll move on to operations.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Recently at City Docks, we've had some more aluminum hydrate barges, cargo transfer. We loaded a 6,600 metric ton bagged rice shipment, a commercial sale, and a liquid ship on the schedule for City Docks. This next month, we've got more aluminum hydrate barges and 2 more lumber vessels. It'll be about 30,000 cubic meters. BT1, as they've discussed, we've been pretty busy. We just finished the 3rd Bayrite ship in July. We did 120,000 tons of Bayrite. We loaded 3 raw coke ships, about 103,000 tons, and a calcine ship and a calcine barge is about another 9,000 tons. On the schedule, we've got 4 more raw coke ships. It's going to be about 140,000 short tons and a calcine ship and a calcine barge. We're still hiring at BT1. If you know anybody that wants a job, starting pay 17, 18, all benefits, part of the state program. So we're looking for people. We're very short-handed at BT1.
Any questions for Don? Thank you, Don. Terrence?
Yes, Mr. President. We recently bid 2 big pipe projects, successful on the first, which started in the first part of July and just finished last Friday. Still waiting to hear back on the customer on the second round, which will be a larger long-term project. We responded to an RFP issued by LED. It's called Project Anchor. Project Anchor is a consultant representing a foreign company looking to build a steel manufacturing facility in the U.S. It's a massive project, over 185 acres, $5 million in covered storage, and about 800 jobs. And we're also working on a port profile and advertisement for the next North American Clean Energy magazine issue for August and September. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Terrence.
Okay, Nick, engineering?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Just a quick update or overview of our projects as of today. We currently have 11 projects in construction right now, 2 of which will be complete in the next couple months. They're going to be replaced by 2 more projects that you recently awarded at previous board meetings. We also have our BT1 storage pad project is out for bid now, or starting tomorrow, I think is what it is. It's going to be funded by the Port Priority Program, so in the next month's meeting, I'll be bringing that one for award. We also have another 15 projects in various stages of design right now, so those will be coming down the pipeline in the next year. And I'll be glad to answer any other questions.
Questions? Thank you, sir. Do we have any reports on lobbying in addition to what's been filed? Okay. Anything else to come before the board? We have a motion for executive session.
Mr. President, I move we go into executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.